Good morning, beloved. Welcome back on this beautiful, chilly spring Friday morning. I'm feeling good today. Had my cold shower, went through my Wim Hof breathing method, did my push-ups, and I'm feeling great. I'm very encouraged to see how many of you guys are participating in that as well, and have been also quite encouraged to hear back on how many of you have had, how this has given you the impetus, the ability not only to lose weight, start getting back into shape. That's a common sense, practical way for the common man that, Proho doesn't like to go to the gym and overexert himself because he's too busy working. So anything we can do like that helps and doesn't require a lot of time is very beneficial. I see that many of you noticed that, well, for good or for bad, my friend General Sam has just dropped our podcast that we did together last week. If you'd like to go watch that, it's a 2.5 interview that we did together over at Forehead Fables, and I hope to do it again. It was I thought it was going to come out in another week or so, and it came up on my feed this morning, and I went over there, because it is certainly the most unlikely of all YouTube collaborations that have ever been done, but sometimes you just meet your spirit animal, right? And I think General Sam and I have kind of had that connection. General Sam, if you don't know, and of course, be careful with General Sam's content. It's for adults. Don't take your little kids over there. But I don't judge. Man. Let a man be convinced in his own mind. All we can do is just be kind. And I've always liked Sam, and always liked his content. But we did a really great interview, and I was a little bit nervous because I don't know who his, well, I guess I do know who his subscriber base is, and it's going to be Gen Z, young men that are into the gaming community, and very, very different than what we have over here. And I reluctantly jumped into the comments, and I was very, very pleased to see a tremendous outpouring of support and a little bit of surprise. I guess I don't know what folks were expecting. I guess many of them have probably known me on my channel from watching my apocalyptic shorts and have thought I was a complete nutcase, and we're glad to see that I was not. So shout out to General Sam and his podcast. Once this goes live, I'll put a link over there to that. So, all right. Well, this morning I've been corresponding back and forth with one of our fellow Proho that's going through a really difficult time. And I've thought a lot about him. He's going through some depression, and I guess I've thought a lot about him because it's something that happened very similar to me a few years ago, and I can completely relate. When you're on the highest of highs, especially as a man, as we have, unfortunately, whether for good or for bad, our value, as we've been talking about, as men in this country, in this culture, our value is dependent upon pretty much our jobs. That's what we're valued for. If we're able to be making a bunch of money or having an interesting career, then our value goes up. But let something happen to you where you lose your job, or you are no longer, because of injury or whatever, are able to do it, then your value plummets like a stone. And all of us, I think the majority of us men, understand that instinctively, and that's what goads us along. It's a very unhappy motivation, but that's the way that it is. I have suffered depression from a great loss of income directly related to that. And I didn't have the ability to see the big picture at the time. So what I want to do, and I think that this will encompass some of you as well. If it doesn't, it will eventually encompass some of you, and it's best forewarned. Was it forewarned is, how does that go? It would be better for you to have the knowledge now, so that when you are in the weeds, in the trenches, so to speak, that you can look depression in the eye, you can look at the setback in the eye, and be logical about it and make a good decision. So I know there's nothing worse than someone reading online. This was a lengthy discussion back and forth, and I'm not going to name any names. We're just going to call this gentleman, we'll just call him R, Mr. R. Mr. R was killing it. Mr. R worked as a real estate appraiser. So I'm just going to pull a couple excerpts out of here. He wrote me, and just to give a little backstory, his career as a real estate appraiser. He says, I've really tried to apply my trade to be the very best real estate appraiser that I can be. I even have a master's degree in real estate development. I've helped thousands of people with eminent domain. Eminent domain, if you don't know, is when the government will essentially nationalize your property. There are provisions, and it's an insidious thing, but sometimes it's necessary. Let's say during the Eisenhower administration, once he was over there in Europe and saw the Autobahn, he came back and said, we need to do this. We need to implement this. This was very effective, and that's what brought in our current interstate system, right? So he had to bring the interstates across the road. Obviously, that's going to cross private property, and of course, everyone's going to say, not in my backyard. Well, there comes a time where critical infrastructure like that needs to be put in place. Someone's going to have to suck it up and deal with it. So there is a provision called eminent domain, and if you're ever on the other end of that, you're not going to be happy about it, but they could essentially come in and say, we're taking this for the greater good, and they will or will not compensate you accordingly. So that's what he's talking about with eminent domain. So obviously he's got a master's degree. He knows his business. Condo contracts, terminations, divorces, construction defects, etc. You know, he's basically acting as an advocate or a pseudo lawyer for people that are having problems. So, you know, really involved in the real estate industry. Well, as of just recently, his business is completely dried up. He went from a mid six-figure income to, as he says, basically less than $50,000 a year. And I know there's going to be a lot of people out there will admit your knee-jerk reaction is going to like, oh, boo-hoo, you know, cry me a river. Now he's making what I'm making now. You know, what you don't understand, if you haven't made that sort of money, you think that his expenses are the same as yours. And for right or for wrong, and I'm not casting stones, I did the same thing myself before I woke up to it. You don't have any more money than you did at six figures, than you did at five figures, but you just have more expenses. That's, you know, you just drive a nicer truck, you live in a bigger house, you eat better food, you know, that's just the reality, but many people in that situation find themselves paycheck to paycheck. So let's not get hung up on that. The guy put the work in, built his business. I have no doubt that he sacrifices, and if a man is able to change his position in life and leverage his intellect and his skills where he can earn a great income like that, then hats off to him. I mean, if we were going to be honest about it, would we not all want to do that? Is not the goal for a lot of us, to be able to provide the best we can for our family? So let's not pile on about that he's had this loss. Let's be sympathetic. So he goes on to say, and finishes up, so basically overnight, because of changes in the regulatory commission, essentially what's happened to his job is what's happened to some of you and what is going to happen to more of you. It is the federal government, not even the federal government. The federal government is nothing more than a puppet to the corporations, and the corporations are no more than a puppet to big banks, central bank system as such. So SRDH right there, that's kind of how it works. And then the spider, the adversary, sits on the top controlling people that you've never heard of, you know, if you want to understand how it works. The Congress, U.S. Congress, they're very low tier. And us, we're the lowest of the low. We're the cattle. So when a man can crawl out, dig himself out of the cattle trough, and make his life a little bit better, you know, I don't deny him for that. But what he's fallen victim to is the stripping away of wealth from the middle class. This is a very planned out procedure. AI will take a lot of you guys' jobs. That's going to be used now. So don't think that this isn't going to happen to you. And now that you know and you've been forewarned, I almost have the forewarned metaphor. I'm grabbing pieces of it. You can make preparation. So where he's at now he's making less than $50,000 a year overnight. I have largely been replaced by a computer. I am surviving on non-lender work, but basically feeling worthless. Your daily videos help a lot. That's what we need to speak of. Now, I'll tell you my personal story. This will be a repeat for some of you, but there are new guys here. So indulge us here. All right, so when I met Mrs. W, I was just starting an online business selling my Jeep parts. Started selling my Jeep parts on eBay and grew that business up to a point where I had a kind of a boutique wrecking yard, and we sold things online, doing very well. Built it up to do very well. When we decided, this was in 2008, right around 2008, we decided that when the economy was just crushing, the business was doing well, God really put it upon our hearts that we wanted to get out of the city and move out to the country. Jack was just little then, and we saw it for what it was worth. We wanted to homeschool, and we wanted to be out of that environment. You know, I was an early adopter of this getting out of the city sort of thing. Now, when we made that decision, things were really clicking for me. My business was growing well. I just built a 5,000 square foot dream shop. We had remodeled our house. It was absolutely stunning, beautiful the way that we wanted it. You know, everything was just going along just great, making all these plans. Now, this was 2008, right? So when we looked at our finances and we looked at everything, we're like, okay, well, the houses have never been worth more. We're going to be able to do, this is going to be great. We'll be able to sell our house. We'll have so much money from this that we'll be able to buy an off-grid property and build everything that we want, infrastructure, just how we want it, out of pocket. It's going to be amazing, right? And then we'll be debt-free, and we'll be living up on the mountains, up in God's country, and the work can begin. This was the best laid plan of mice and men, so to speak. Well, put the house up for sale, started looking for property, and I continued to run my business, but the idea was that we're going to cut such a fat hog off this house that I'll be able to put my business in mothballs for 6 months, maybe even a year. We can focus on building the house, focus on developing the off-grid property, and everything will go swimmingly well, right? Well, I bought the property. It was very expensive, you know, buying it 2008, you know, just at the height of the market. I've got my house, hoping to change it. Well, it took a year or so to sell that house, right at the crash of the economy, and we just watched the value of it going down and down and down and down. And the whole time that I'm trying to sell this thing, you know, we don't have, you know, we've now sold our house, and we're in a state of flux, and we're burning through money like crazy, and it's very stressful, very difficult situation. And I'm not going to belabor the point. We covered all of this in our book, but at the end of all of that debacle, 2009, 2010 or so, Mrs. W and I woke up to the fact that we do not have enough money to finish this project. And because it's off-grid, because it is not traditional, there's no way a bank is going to loan money to us on this. So we were faced with an important decision. Do we press forward and get the house 3/4 done? And this isn't a very austere environment, you know, with miles of road cut through the side of a cliff. You know, it's a very difficult situation and difficult place to live in. You have to have resources. You have to have equipment. You know, you're completely on your own. And we could have finished the house, but we had a lot of setbacks and problems with the county, making unrealistic requirements for engineering, unrealistic, you know, our bids for concrete was coming in at 4 times what we'd anticipated. There were just a lot of things. Everything that I did was against me. The big bulldozer that I bought, I pulled the transmission out in the field, rebuilt it, put it back in, and it wouldn't work. It was problem after problem after problem. I just kept getting knocked down, knocked down, knocked down. I fought as hard as I could to make this happen. I felt that God had put this upon me, on both of us, to get out into this country location, to get remote. And I was starting up the channel at the time, but there was no money really coming in from it. And we had to make a decision. I put the well in, I put miles of road in. Mrs. W and I had single-handedly logged the whole side of the mountain. We had cut the foundation. The septic system was all in. A lot of money put in it, plus $250,000 just in the cost of the property alone, not including, you know, probably another $500,000 in improvements. And when we looked at our finances, we realized that we're not going to be able to finish it. So we had to make a decision. We had just enough money left over that we may be able to get into a new place, cover the down payment, but just barely. So we went to the family that we bought the property from, and we just told them what I just shared with you. This is not going to happen. And we brainstormed, and they were really, really wonderful people. They're friends of ours to this day. Brainstormed together how we could make this happen, and they all ultimately came to the same understanding as we, that it was just not possible. Financially, it was just not possible. And so here I am in a position where I am starting to really get concerned. I had left our beautiful home that we'd remodeled just the way we wanted. I'd left the 5,000 square foot stick framed beautiful shop that it was all that I'd ever wanted. It was tailor-made, perfectly built just for the things I like to do. I had been uploading YouTube videos, talking and telling everyone and boasting about how we're going to do all these things and we're going to be doing this and sharing that with the videos. That was my first channel that I ended up shutting down. And so it was really done. Not to mention that I had also, of course we had shared this with our family. We're going to do this. And, it was very humbling to me, and I felt really embarrassed because I had said I was going to do all these things and I was not able to complete what I'd started. I was quite ashamed of that, to be honest. I was ashamed that I'd let my wife down. I was ashamed that I had, about many, many things. And fortunately for us, that family, they didn't have to do this. They could have drug us in the courts, but they accepted it back. So, we had given, we'd put down, we'd put down a lot of money, I guess maybe $100,000 or so of a down payment, and we were going to pay it off on contract to them. But they took it back. The agreement was they kept all of the down payment that we had made. Also, they benefited from all of the improvements, the well, the septic system, and it was much more, I had done all the hard work. It was much more, it would have been easier for them to sell now that it was all turnkey and ready to go. But I didn't have any negotiating options. That was all that we had. And we just basically had to walk away from it. A week later, I found myself, Mrs. W and I, in about a 400 square foot rental that belonged to my folks, a vacation rental that they had, a one room. I don't even think it was 400 square feet. No, not probably half of that, probably more like 200 square feet. A rental with one room and one bedroom, not even a room, just the rental was one room, the whole thing. A kitchenette, no kitchen or anything, and a little bathroom and a little loft up a bed with a ladder to sleep in. And I sat there with all of my business completely shut down because I had no place to operate it because my shop was gone. I had everything that I owned. My business had a lot of parts and tools and stuff. Everything from that beautiful shop, we had sitting in 7 storage lockers, storage units, big ones, and that was burning cash as well. Seven storage units, yeah. And I'm sitting there thinking, how did everything go so bad? Now it's 2010, whatever. Still, the economy is trash. It's terrible. Trying to get money to borrow is difficult. I'm self-employed. I don't have any income coming in. How are we going to possibly qualify for any sort of bank financing? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can see the hole that I was in. I went from having a comfortable 6-figure income, writing, everything going well and providing for my family, to sitting in this rental with nothing going on, just burning a little bit of cash that we had. And I was really depressed. Mrs. W, bless her, she kept a positive outlook this whole time. I didn't want to load content. I didn't want to do anything. I thought, man, I don't know how this went so bad. And the worst thing was I was really angry with God about that. I felt betrayed. I felt that He had called me out of everything that I had built that was so beautiful, that home and that shop. And I responded to the calling. And when I got up there, he abandoned me. He didn't help me. And I just remember up there just crying out to him. I was so angry just about that bulldozer alone. The bulldozer, I bought a TD7. It's like a D6, D7 sized cat, a big cat. Set it for logging with a drum and an arch on the back. I needed that to build the roads, and I needed that to do the logging, to clear for the homestead. I bought it with a bad transmission. I knew that it was. I got it cheaper that way. And I had done my due diligence, and I found a guy that was willing to rebuild it for me, and we had a price, and I looked at everything, and I thought, okay, I can buy this. You know, put $15,000 into the transmission. I'll have a brand new transmission. I should have a solid cat. Well, I did all of that, did everything right, drug that monster up there, and then for it not to work. I had to pull that transmission out, and I think the videos are still on my channel. I had to pull that transmission out of that cat in the field, and the size of it was about this big around and so long, and weighs thousands of pounds. You know, this is a big, big machine. It took me all day just to unhook the hoses and unhook everything just to get at it. You know, just to give you an idea. Had to bring it up and then out because it had a ROPS canopy on it. But I did it. And I'm not a heavy equipment mechanic, but I did it because I had to do it. Got it out, put it in the back of the truck, took it clear up halfway up to Seattle to the guy that rebuilt it originally, just to go back through it as well, go through it again. Tore it all open, went through it again, put it back in the field, and it did the exact same thing. It's still, just to this day, just talking about it today, is one of the worst experiences of my life. I was so angry at God. I'm like, can't you help me a little bit? What do you ask? How much can one man do? What are you asking from me? I'm single-handedly doing this by myself. I single-handedly logged the whole side by myself, great big fir trees at great peril and risk, and skidded those things up here and put them on log trucks. And Mrs. W helped me when she could, but I did, I did most of it. So here I am after all of that, sitting in this rental, angry at myself, trying to figure out what just happened, how did I fall so far so quickly, and certainly angry at God. I was just, at this point, I was really willing just to give up on the whole thing. I was so disgusted. I was ready to give up on my faith. I was willing to give up on the stupid idea of moving out in the middle of nowhere. All of it was foolishness. I'm like, I've just been a fool. So now what? I go back, I guess I'll just go back and get a job working by the hour, working for a construction company, and that's going to be my fate. This didn't work out very well. Well, Mrs. W, the internal optimist, and that's why God gave her to me, because she always looks on the positive side of things. She said, let's get out and let's just go look. I said, maybe we don't have enough money to buy anything. We barely have enough to even cover a down payment. Property is so expensive right now. I just don't see this happening. Nonetheless, let's go do it anyway. All right, so we had so little money that we were looking at very different properties than we were before, and that was very depressing. And we just started doing it. We went back to the area that we originally kind of wanted to live in and started looking around and came upon the place that we ended up buying that was before here. And through a series of miracles, we were able to buy a piece of property that wasn't for sale and get in there, and where we spent a decade raising Jack, and that's where we were for so many years on the Wranglerstar channel. So that was a difficult time, and we got moved in there, and even though I saw the miracles happening and I saw things taking place that shouldn't have happened for most people, some things like it's not even for sale, and then Mrs. W wrote a letter, and then they said it was for sale, that they would sell it to us, and then we made a really low-ball offer, not because we were trying to insult anyone. It actually belonged to just an entity somewhere on the East Coast that had never seen it. So we're just emailing back and forth on something that they're trying to get rid of, but they just didn't even know what it was, other than just big acreage. We sent a low-ball offer in because we didn't have any choice. Even with what we had was not enough. We ended up borrowing temporarily, some money from my sister and from my parents to be able to get it up to something where we even thought that they would consider it. Sent that in, prayed about it. Mrs. W. prayed more than I did. I was still angry at God over this. I thought there was no chance that this could happen. And they sent an email back, no, we're not going to accept that offer. We're going to counter. And we thought, that's not possible. It was everything we had. There was nothing left to offer. We couldn't meet a counter. We weren't willing to go back and ask for more than we'd already borrowed from family. You know what the offer came back? And if you know real estate, you'll appreciate this. And this is a big piece of property, and this is a big transaction. It's not the counter offer came back $1,000 more than our offer, which we couldn't even believe it. Like, we looked at it, we're like, did they forget a zero or two zeros? But that's what they did. So we immediately agreed to it, and it was touch and go for a while, but we ultimately got into it, and off we went. Right? So, as I've said, and I don't remember all the times, it was probably, I think, a year or so later, I'd worked and we started improving, and we put our garden and orchard in, and I was definitely not spending time in prayer, and I was just focusing on trying to clean this place up and make it happen, trying to build the YouTube channel and such. But it was a moment I'll never forget. It was a moment that Jack was in the garden. He was just a little kid. Mrs. W. was out in the garden. It was springtime, and we were planting things in our raised garden boxes. I was working on I was weeding. I was just weeding, pulling weeds, and I just stopped for a moment and just looked. It was one of the first times in decades that I actually was aware of my surrounding. I just lifted my head up and just looked around, and I saw that beautiful view of the mountain, and I saw that. I saw my wife and my son and this beautiful piece of property that we were living on, and the water and everything and all the trees. And I saw the big picture for the first time for a long time. And I realized at that moment that God never wanted us to buy that off-grid place. And I took it upon myself. I took that idea that he put upon me, that desire that he put upon Mrs. W. and I didn't collaborate with him. I didn't stay in prayer with him and making sure that we were making the right decision. I just said, thanks, this is a great idea, I'll run with it, I'll take it from here. And I was trying to force something to happen that God did not want it to happen. And if you find yourself in that situation, there's no amount of effort or determination or stubbornness that is going to force something against God's will. He ultimately wanted us to be in a different place. And I saw that for the first time in that situation. And that was part of that was a big healing that day, a part of my understanding that I needed to be. It was a humbling that needed to take place till I could get to the point where I would listen and hear him for the first time. Moses was born into privilege. Well, he wasn't born into privilege, but he was raised in privilege. If you don't know the story, just real quickly, Moses, this is from the Old Testament in the good book. The children of Israel were slaves to the Egyptians for 400 years. And some things came about where the Pharaoh was made aware that there was going to be a man that was raised up, a powerful man raised up through these Hebrews that would ultimately overthrow him. And to make sure that didn't happen, I'm going off memory here. I'm on dangerous ground here. I don't mean to be irreverent or get things wrong, but it's the gist of the story. It's been a while since I've read it. There was an edict put out where all of the male children of the Hebrews were to be destroyed and thrown to the crocodiles. And in a desperate attempt, Moses, who was a baby at the time, his mother, to save him, made the small ark of bulrushes, like a small reed, like a waterproof basket, put the man-child in there, put him in the river, in hopes that at least there was a chance that someone would save him down the river, at least because his fate was sealed with Pharaoh. The men were probably on their way. So she did this, and then Moses is going down the stream in this small waterproof basket, Pharaoh's, I don't remember if it was, I think it was Pharaoh's daughter, was down at the Nile washing. The temple or the Pharaoh's palace would have been right on the water. And there would have been stone steps down to the Nile itself where the women would have went down for water and for bathing and all sort of things. Imagine this palatial palace. Well, she sees Moses in the basket, pulls him out, sees that there's a child in there. It also, interesting thing, says that he was comely and beautiful, that he was attractive or a cute kid. Which always helps, right? It's always easier to, if you're handsome or good looking, your life definitely is easier than if you're ugly, and maybe that helped Moses. If he had been an ugly or deformed child, would we be having this story? I don't know. She saves him, and decides to raise him as her own. Well, being raised in the house of Pharaoh, that changed Moses' future dramatically. What he would have been just a common slave with his people. Now he's been elevated to be probably the number 2 in line for Pharaoh's throne, right behind Pharaoh's son. Raised in privilege, he's got the best education, he's now getting the best nutrition, he's being trained for leadership, for combat, to be a soldier, to be a pharaoh, in the event of something, as a backup maybe. I'm going to make these assumptions. But he was raised in Pharaoh's house, the same as Pharaoh's son. I believe that the Pharaoh's son and Moses were good friends and probably went to school and were educated together, probably raised together from birth. So here we have Moses, every single advantage, born to royalty. He gets to attend the best military schools, the best of everything. God comes to him in a dream and makes him aware of what his role in life is. Moses becomes aware of his past and realizes, you mean I came from the Hebrews? That he's made aware of the story and realizes, and now he's starting to look at his people with a very different outlook. And what he may have oppressed before, now he's starting to see, maybe there's something I can do about this. God made him aware in some way that he was going to have something to do with the liberating of these people out of 400 years of slavery and bondage. And Moses was excited about this, I would imagine. Good, but as a young man that has had every privilege, he's thinking, what can I do? I want to get this going now. I don't want to wait around. I'm ready to do this deliverance now, to be a great leader of these people and to do a great thing. And the good book tells us that there was a certain instance where Moses was out and about and he saw a guard that was abusing some of the Hebrews, beating them. And Moses became indignant about that and thought, well, here's my opportunity. I'm going to go there and I'm going to do something about it. Ran up there and murdered the guard that was abusing his countrymen. Once he had murdered him, he'd realized that this could go very badly for him. And so the good book tells us he buried him in the sand, hoping that no one would find him. Thinking that I've got the mandate, God has told me that I'm going to be doing a great work, and I guess we might as well go ahead and get started. Took that upon himself. Did God ask Moses to murder that Egyptian taskmaster? We're not told that he did, but Moses did it. Next day or a couple days later, there was a scuffle again between 2 Hebrews, not with a taskmaster, but between themselves. And Moses went up there and tried to interject himself. Brother, why are you fighting with your fellow man here? Why don't you guys try to get along? And the slave turned to him and said, or what? If I don't do what you say, are you going to kill me like you killed that Egyptian? Well, when Moses heard that story, or heard that he knew what he had done, thought that it had been kept in secret because he buried that man he'd murdered in the sand, he was terrified. He knew that his life was not going to be worth anything once word got out that he had killed one of Pharaoh's guards. So he immediately packed up what he could, if he packed up anything, and fled into the desert and ran away and left everything that he had ever known. All of his hopes, dreams, and aspirations of maybe even being a pharaoh one day, living in privilege, all now dashed, and he's a nomad in the desert with nothing, no family, no country, no people, no home. Sounds familiar, right? I believe it was 40 years or so, Moses led that lifestyle as a poor nomad. He ultimately tied in with some other people, had a wife, had children, went on. Realized that, well, something happened. God said this. It didn't happen. I tried to make it happen, but c'est la vie. This is my new life. 40 years or so. 40 years changes a man, right? He wasn't, at the end of that 40 years, he didn't have that bravado, that fire and brimstone, that mandate, that youthful indiscretion that he did when he was in Pharaoh's house, I could imagine. Probably very calm and seasoned from a lifetime of contemplation, thinking, and wandering in the wilderness with his sheep and his small family. So Moses was quite surprised the day that he was sitting out on the step or wherever he was, and we have the story of the burning bush, and God came to him and basically laid it out as to how Moses was going to fulfill the mandate that God had originally given him 40 years ago. Now, was Moses so eager to go back and face Pharaoh after that? I'm guessing probably not, because we have that in the discussion between him and God of Moses trying to wiggle out of it. He's not very comfortable. Even though he knows he's standing right there in the presence of God, he is still making excuses. He says something to the effect like, who am I to go and to lead your people out of bondage? I mean, I can't, I'm not even a good speaker. I'm slow of speech. He's trying to make deals. He's trying to talk God out of it. He even convinces God to let him go with a friend, his nephew, Aaron. so that he didn't have to go by himself. You know, this is reality. That's why it's so important, beloved, for us to know the old stories, because we see what the old stories are is they're a history of how God deals with people. And that gives us a lot of insights about his character. Sometimes you think that God is not approachable, that he's an all-powerful being with the ability to speak matter into existence, and when you actually take time to think about that, that can be somewhat intimidating. And you can project that upon him as not being approachable, not being really concerned with the real nuts and bolts of life that's going on down here. But that interaction, and that's also solidified in the interaction that he has with Abraham. And that Abraham was able to convince God to go a little bit different direction or even argue with him. And he tells us, God tells us, I speak to those men face to face like a man speaks to his friend. And he holds that up as the example of that's how he wants to deal with us. Not as of course, God should be respected. He is all-powerful, and he's the Alpha and the Omega. He's the creator of all things, the one and only. Let's not lose sight of that. But also, let's not lose sight of we're also his children, his sons and daughters. And that relationship's very close as well. So don't forget that. These stories are important because that interaction between Moses and God, that interaction between Abraham and God, Gideon, the many different examples, is very, very insightful as to the character of God and how he cares about these little things. And he was even able, Moses was even able to convince God to help let him send a buddy, let a buddy go with him. Right? So we all know that story. So why am I telling you this? Why is this important? How does that relate to the story of our man who's a real estate investor, my big mistakes, and Moses? Can I tie all this together in some way? It's that, and before we tie this all, there's one other thing that I'm going to throw out there. I could be wrong about this. I don't understand all things, but I do believe, beloved, that God is going to be bringing truths to us and our fellow brothers all over the world in many different ways, even from places that you may not or I may not understand. That's why we need to be careful and to be open-minded about where insight and revelation comes from in these final days. We got to be careful and not be dogmatic. It's a slippery slope. It's a fine line we have to be on because we don't want to compromise what we know to be true and right. We're not becoming Unitarians here. We're accepting all things, and there's many, God is a hub, and there's many spokes or paths to God. I'm not getting into that at all. But I also understand that I hold on to a lot of dogmas that I've believed to be 100% true that we may find out that we were on the wrong page. And if we just doggedly stick to those and don't have an open mind, we're going to miss out and we're going to get passed over. That's why God told us, you don't put new wine into old wineskins. Why? Old wineskins have already expanded. They expanded. They were new. The wine was new. The wine fermented. It expanded when everything, and they grew together. But now that a wineskin is expanded and it's become hard old leather, and it's not as pliable as it once was, you don't dare put an unfermented or new wine that's about to ferment into one of these, because as it expands again, it will split the wineskin and everything will be lost. That story is an example to us, and it's a warning especially to us older proho who are set in our ways with our dogmas. It's so much easier sometimes for young men and young people to accept the gospel because they are a new wineskin. We have to remain new wineskins ourselves. I was thinking today, and this is a tremendous leap, and many of you are not going to agree with me on this whatsoever, and I don't even know if I completely understand it. But let's take Mr. Andrew Tate, for example. Is Andrew Tate's his current situation, where he's sitting, he went from the highest of the highs, the top G, driving Bugattis and living what the world would tell us to be a dream life, to sitting in a Eastern Bloc prison. You want to talk about a fall from grace. You think mine was extreme. His is worse. Do you think our friend who's a real estate developer or appraisal is worse, is bad? Andrew's case is worse. If you're going to talk about what a fall is. You could even go so far as to say that Andrew Tate's case right now might even be equal or on par with, or maybe even worse than what Moses had to go through, if we're going to be honest, if we're talking about just general celebrity. And look at the number of young men, the men that are most lost right now, the men that we're trying to reach right here. Look at the number of them that resonated with his message. For right or for wrong, I'm not condoning his message. I'm just saying that there was something there. There was a hunger there, and he drew these men to him because they're looking for a leader. They're looking for guidance. They're looking for some purpose and substance in their life. The fact that Andrew Tate was brought down to the lowest point is that his 40 years in the desert, is what's going on in his mind right now. When he comes out, if he comes out of that prison, his first live stream is going to break the internet. It's going to be the viewership. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if it was if it was a multiple million view live stream, probably 100 million view video when everything is said and done, whether that be an interview or he does it on his own platform. Can you imagine the testimony that man could get across to the young men of this world if God had converted his heart or his mind and put some perspective into his mind from that time that him and his brother spent in prison? I'm just saying, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Is he going to come out and is he going to be the top G again, promoting a hedonistic lifestyle? I'm not judging. I'm just asking the question. Or is this one of those many avenues that God is going to be using to reach young men? I don't know. What do you guys think? What do you think? But just to tie all that in, and I wanted to share these stories with our friend R here, just to lift him up to realize that when you're at your lowest, when you've been brought low like that, when you've been humbled like that, that is usually required. You've gotten to a point, Andrew has gotten to a point, Moses, myself got to the point where ego and trusting in oneself and their abilities and their finances, that became your God. Yes, you maybe even went to church. You may even gave lip service to faith. But really, if we were going to look at it, what was Moses trusting in to deliver God's people? The strength of his arm, his mandate, his authority that he'd been given, his training. What was my God? My ability and my equipment and my everything, that I was going to make all that happen myself. So the advice that I would give to R and anyone else that finds themselves in that situation, we needed to be humbled, because God would do no less, because he knew that if we continued down the path that we were on, we would go so far as to be irredeemable and we would be lost. So it's not an easy thing to have to deal with, but it's a necessary thing to have to deal with. And you may not even see it at first. It may take you a year or two, just like it took me, before you can finally lift up your head and realize that this was for the greater good. I'm in a better position now. This has reestablished me. It set my shoulders square. God put me back on the straight and narrow. And now I can see the plan so clearly. So my advice is keep your head down. Use this. Understand that this is a change for good, and that God has something in store for you that you can't see yet. And don't do anything drastic to end your life early, or to do something or say something that you will not be able to recover from, trusting that in a year from now things could be completely different. That the skill set that you developed as a real estate appraiser very well may be it might be something that's very important to God that he needs. And he needs you to apply it in a way that you haven't used it before. So take courage in that. You and many other men have had to and will have to endure this sort of thing. And it's where strength and character are forged, truly. All right, goodness. I'm ranting. We have a super chat. Let's get into our super chats here. I'm sorry, gentlemen. Go on for an hour with my nonsense. I'm spacing out here. I don't even know. There we go. There we go. Nothing but the best production here, gentlemen. Goodness. Okay, let's jump into this. We have a super chat from Scott the Kelp. Welcome, Scott the Kelp, kicking everything off. He says, hello from Texas, man. We are always happy to see Texas man here. As I'm so fond of saying, I've never received a warmer embrace than from our friends at Texas. We had a great time. Texas man, he works at night, a night site company here in Texas called XS Sites. And I was curious to what site you have on your EDC. Scott, you're not going to be happy with this. The factory Glock night sights. I'm kind of a homer to keep things original, and I do have night sights, I think, on everything except for I think on my G26, I have, I think I even still have the plastic sights, and that's my main carry. So that's it. But the other ones, I don't know. I don't know who makes. I don't know who makes the sights for Glock. Maybe they make their own now. But I have night sights on my 19s and just the plastic stock sights on my 26. They work fine, man. I don't have any problem. You know, I took them off. I got sucked in to James Yeager back in the day on YouTube, and he was promoting those safari style sights, the XS big dots, that, you know, the big V with the big dot, the prominent dot on the front post. And I bought into all that, and I bought those things. I went through a pistol course with those things. It was tragic. I'm not a gifted shooter. I would just say proficient. We'll just leave it with that, proficient. But I was sub-proficient with those XS big dots. I hated them so bad that I immediately yanked them off, threw them in the trash, and I put the old sights back on. So that's what I'm running. Nothing fancy. Thank you, Scott. We have a super chat from our friend Isaac Cox. Welcome, Isaac. Isaac says Trump the traitor was finally indicted. Well, we'll see. He had his day in court. I don't know if I agree with you about traitor. If we're going to put the label of traitor on presidents and ex-presidents, I think we could have a very in-depth and in illuminating discussion. But leading off with something so inflammatory as that speaks to your ignorance. I'm not a Trumper, but you have TDS terribly. We have a super chat from our friend Dr. Prepper. Good to see you back in the chat, Dr. Prepper. Dr. Prepper writes, converting digital dollars into cold, hard assets more and more every day with each news story. Goodness, isn't that the truth? I told you, beloved, last year. That's why turn that into something where you can make some money, that you can go out and make a living for your family. Truck and trailer, dump trailer, maybe a piece of heavy equipment. That's why I bought those cats and the skid steer and track loader. Those are hard assets that I own outright, no payments, low hours, brand new machines. You know, that could sustain me for a long time. Jack and I could go to work. I could make a living. Dump trailer, just like Dr. Prepper's saying, hard assets. Yeah, we're getting wrecked with this inflation. Land, tools, gold, whatever might you consider. Man, firearms, ammunition, anything, that sort of thing. Freeze-dried food, anything like that. Heavy equipment. You know, figure your skill set. What can you do, or what can you learn to do, and make sure you have that on hand. Buy it used, buy it well, and if things go bad, you'll probably still be able to sell it for what you paid for it. At least you're not going to lose it, and no one can take that from you apart unless a thief comes and takes it, but you can take measures against that. But good question. I think you nailed it right there, Dr. Prepper. Hard assets, land, local land, rental, if you can. Be careful. Don't get stuck buying at the top of a bubble. But unless you are really a savvy real estate person, don't be going out and buying off-site real estate, getting sucked up into the hype of what you've read on the internet. Stick with what you know. Buy land that you can go drive by and keep an eye on if it's going to be a rental. You know, we have rentals in town. We are very careful who we put in them. You know, we make good decisions. You know, we're not being invasive or anything, but it's not nothing to be able to drive by and just put eyes on it. Just make sure that everything is okay. Plus, you're also, you know, you have an obligation to your renters. If they have a problem and it's the middle of winter and the heat's out, you need to make that a priority. Make sure they're taken care of as well. And that's a difficult thing to do when you have to travel halfway across the country. We have a super chat from Gnostic Academy. Shout out to you, $7.77. Very clever. I like that. I can get behind that. Gnostic says, God bless you, Cody. You are such a good man. Well, let's not get carried away now. Your honesty and vulnerability is so refreshing. These streams are just fantastic and helpful. Well, I appreciate that. I'm like you, gentlemen. You know, I find it's so funny. People have been recommending movies of late, even though they may be good movies. My desire and my taste, and tell me, put sevens in the chat if you feel the same way, if you're vibing with me on this. Have you found when you're flipping through social media, you're choosing content to watch, whether that be YouTube or YouTube Shorts or TikTok, do you find the moment you see a video that has been like professionally shot, meaning you can tell immediately that there are actors in there, you can tell by the professional look of it, you can tell by the lighting, there's multiple cameras that are switching back and forth, so you can obviously see that everything is staged, because that doesn't happen. You don't just do a man on the street interview with multiple cameras and perfect wardrobe and attractive people with perfect teeth and all that. What we're used to, movies, television, right? When I see that now, man, I cannot get off of that quick enough. It's like all I think of is that it's just fake BS propaganda. I'm so over that. I want things that are authentic and real. That's why I want real people. I want to watch. I don't care if the lighting's not good. I don't care if they shot it with their phone. I don't care if they're using the speaker on their phone, whatever. If it's something on the scene and it's real and it's happening and it's someone pouring their heart out or sharing an experience, it's so authentic, you can pick up on it immediately. That's what I'm drawn to. Like just to go back and to watch actors playing, pretending on a movie scene is just lost its magic to me. I just am not interested in it. And maybe it's been because of the exposure to things that are real and raw and happening in real time, dealing with, like our friend R here, dealing with my personal mistakes and problems, going back, talking about real people, real things that are affecting you. Isn't that what you want? Like, Hollywood is so dead. Like, if you're still watching movies and still supporting those filthy degenerates, you know, you need to shake yourself, to be honest. You need to really shake yourself and get that trash out of your home and stop supporting these degenerates. We have a super chat from our friend Justin Poppy. Shout out to you, Justin. Welcome. And Keys and Sofa. Keys and Sofa, a very generous super chat, $25. Thank you, Keys and Sofa. That's a funny name. Keys and Sofa says that he's a 30-year-old night shift truck driver, home every evening, making $120K. Good for you. Good for you, Keys and Sofa. Look at that. 100 driving, local, night shift, which is kind of a bummer. But the $120K a year, that does soothe the pain, doesn't it? Good for you, brother. I'm proud of you. Excellent. I'm proud of you to find yourself a niche like that. Working men that are working the trades deserve this. They've been abused for far too long. He goes on to say, I worked very hard to reach this point, and I find it very difficult to find dating prospects with clinical OCD. I'm crippled by that as well. Don't feel too bad. Do you have any suggestions for me? Like for the dating or for the OCD? 30-year-old night shift. Yeah, you're 30-year-old. 30-year-old, a man should be, that's about the age when I was getting up to. I must have been in my mid-30s or so when I got married, where it is a good time for a man to be married. It's a good time to start thinking about it. You've got a tremendous income. Just like yesterday, that income, that 120K right there, that puts you, traditionally, it puts you about in the top 10, 12% of all men. So you're going to have to be careful because there's a lot of predatory women out there that would look to, that would solve a lot of their problems, wouldn't it? If they could get you to sign on that dotted line and make their problems your problems with that big fat income. When dating, be sure to downplay that. Don't lead with that. That will bring the gold diggers out like cockroaches. So you have to be careful with that from what you drive. You don't have to be a bum, but you also, I certainly wouldn't lead with that so that you know that someone's with you because of you. But I would seriously, it's going to be, look at the comments from people that are out there in the trenches right now trying to date Western women and the difficulties. I would seriously consider going overseas. I seriously would. I would get a passport. And now, I have not dated overseas, but I have looked into it and I've heard back from a lot of you since I've been talking about this a lot. And the general consensus is among Proho that are doing it, is stay away from the services that are typically located in the city, whether you go to Southeast Asia or South America. If you could get involved, I was thinking about this, like how would I go about it if I was recommending this to a young man? I would probably get involved with a Christian ministry of some sort that is actively doing ministry work or missionary work in the area that you're kind of interested in, and get involved with that. I would be very upfront about it. I would avoid the traps in the cities and the sites and women that are just going to be more of the same. And I would get myself in a position where I was in rural locations, rural areas. And I would not be in too big of a hurry to do this. I would go spend time in the community and feel it out. If I liked what I saw, if I determined that these women have traditional values, I would definitely I would stick to places that have strong English language as a second language. And there are a lot of options like that for now. You don't want to have to overcome that. So you can have a conversation with people. But spend some time in the community, Maybe you don't even bring it up the first time. The first time is just a sightseeing. You're just getting reconnaissance. You're just getting information. If you like what you see and you've educated yourself, you think this is an option, go back. Go back for another mission treat or to build the school, what have you. Go to families, or if there is a tribal leader or whatever, whoever the big man, the head man of the town is, and express your interests and be upfront about it. Hey, I'm not happy with the values of traditional Western women. This is who I am. You've seen me here. I've been here before. I'm interested in finding a wife. Be very pragmatic about it and be very open about it. And he most likely, I'm just going to assume, from what I've read and learned, he can maybe offer some recommendations, and you could enter into negotiations with the family. And it may be part of the deal. You might have to even support that family a little bit through monthly stipends and such, but it's typically an insignificant amount. And you may even choose to stay over there. Because as America, one thing that we need to talk about is the reality in the next 10 years, and we're not going to get into this today, this is a whole other topic, but Proho has to prepare himself for America no longer being a superpower, being the second superpower in this country. That we're on the glide path to that happening. It can be reversed, it can be turned around, but in the current political situation and what's going on in Washington, I don't see that happening unless something drastically changes. If it drastically changes, and it will have to change within the next 10 years, inside of 10 years, we will be essentially looked at as we will be the second world power next to China. And that puts us in a very difficult position, worse than even weaker nations, because weaker nations like the EU, if they're able to maintain their cohesiveness through all of this, weaker nations are not a threat to China, but the second most powerful nation certainly is a threat. And you will be right in the crosshairs of all of that. So, one thing that we'll be needing to be thinking about and talking about is making provisions and making plans for if and when we enter into that next era within the 10 years, what are we going to do? If you have the ability to get dual citizenship in the EU or in any other country that is not antagonistic towards China, I would highly recommend pursuing that. What we need to do here, Proho, now, those of us, I'll be 60, in my mid-60s, so, is it realistic for me to be moving to the EU or to a different country to escape the problems that we're going to have here, being, under the thumb of China? Maybe, maybe not. But my son is going to be 30, and he's going to be right in the middle of it. So we need to be thinking about that now. Be proactive. God has always given me insight where I was able to be ahead of the curve on all these things. To buy just before it got too expensive. A lot of these things have happened, and I'm not going to turn a deaf ear to what we're talking about right now. Like, this is not an actual probability or likelihood. So the more now that we still have some flexibility, we can still move around freely and such, we want to look to how can we get our children established in this new coming paradigm. Something we need to look at. I haven't nailed it down yet, but I want to bring that to your attention so you can start thinking about it as well. So that's what I would do, keys and sofa. Or, if you don't want to do that, if you want to marry a Western woman, just go back. We've talked about this. I don't want to belabor the point here, but we've talked about this in depth of the red flags and such. Do not cohabitate. If you want children, nobody over 30. And don't date single mothers. Those are the 3 rules. We have a super chat from Fordor. Welcome, Fordor. $80. Goodness, that's very, very generous of you. Thank you, Fordor. Fordor writes, "This is my tithe. This is my church. You, sir, are a preacher, and I know this is better spent by you than by some foul, limp-wristed pastor." Man, I can relate to that. "I love you, and I'm praying for you. Thank you." Yes, You know, I agree. You know, when I told God of my arrogance here, when I was having a discussion with my Heavenly Father, and I could see where He was moving me. You know, I could see I don't want to be here doing this. I'm a very reluctant person to take on this mantle. Very reluctant, because I know myself, and I know I'm unfit for the job. In our discussion, I said, I will go. I'll stand in the gap, even if I don't understand. But one thing I am not going to do, I drew a line in the sand. I will not be here begging for money, not be passing a hat, not be constantly fundraising like those TV evangelists. I'm not going to do that. You know what? That's not my problem. You promised me that you know what I have need of, that He knows what you have need of before we ask. You know I have bills. You know what I need to take care of my family. That's your responsibility. I can't do everything. If I'm going to give up the ability that I have or harm my channel financially, and this certainly harms my channel, I'm completely shadow banned now. You know, but that's fine. That's what God has asked me to do, and He'll provide a way for it. Then you need to provide for me. And right there's a perfect example. You know what? Muzzle not the ox. If God's people are working for the ministry, we have an obligation to look after them if they're doing the work. You know, if they're forsaking their ability. If a man is doing the work of God, then he needs to be taken care of by the clergy. And that's just the way that it's set up. So, and that's his job. And right there, it's manifesting and taking place. And I appreciate that. And I do the same thing. 10%. This is the criteria for Proho. This is what God set it up. 10% of your income, whatever that may be, that goes to His work. No, wherever you want to put it. You know, I'm not going to tell you where to put it. Your local church, give it to your local church if they're doing good work and there's proper auditing and you know it's just not going there to give the pastor a comfortable life. That's a place to do it. But be reluctant about some of these charities. Charities, are they going to give you, are they putting that money towards, is it being gobbled up in administrative things? So just whatever it decides. Us personally, like we talked the other day, because we're not part of a structured church here, I feel that the best place to put it is in your local community. That's what we do. Put it in your local community and do it anonymously. We want to be careful. We don't want to get into that situation where we are giving so publicly that we are doing it so that we receive accolades from men, because that's of no value. The good book tells us, you see that? People doing that, giving publicly, doing things publicly, praying, making a big spectacle of themselves, wearing these righteous-looking garments and such. Christ tells us, you see that? They've had their reward, but they'll have no reward from God. You do it secretly. Do it through a third party so that you don't make someone feel like they're beholden to you. You know, that old term, as cold as charity. Have you ever heard that? No truer word has ever been spoken, as cold as charity. Someone that it will destroy a relationship. It will make a man, two men can be on equals, and one can receive charity from the other, and they're no longer equal. And ultimately that could destroy that relationship money does funny things to people. Let the left hand not know what the right hand is doing when it comes to that. But thank you, Fordor. That's very generous of you. Goodness. We're going to need to go in that direction, beloved. We're going to have to be self-supported here. It's just the writing on the wall. If you want me to go this hard on these topics that I have been going, it's just a matter of time before all of that will be taken away and we'll be relying 100% on you guys. If you want that, then that's what you have. Then that's what I'm asking you to support here. That's why we're doing this. We have a super chat from Mr. Kaysen McClung. Shout out to you, Kaysen. Kaysen's been with us for 1 year. Welcome. Kaysen writes, thank you for your content. Currently listening while driving from Central Florida to Chattanooga. That's in Tennessee for East Coast man. What are your thoughts on Harley Davidson man? I do not like Harley Davidsons. I don't like the culture. I mean, You take a 1968 Panhead kickstart, a guy that's, now I can get with that. That's cool. That's an American classic. But that these boomers, these weekend boomers, trying to be hard on the roads on these big antiquated pigs are, they're just not for me. I'll tell you something. I'll tell you what. This will paint vividly my disdain for these bikes. So Mrs. W, so tomorrow's my birthday, April 1st. Mrs. W, I'm taking her on a surprise, like a long weekend, a surprise date, trip type of thing. So where we were going, it's not far from here, but where we were going was, I was looking up activities and how I could surprise her. And so one thing that I did was I rented a Mustang convertible. So we're going to be out in, it's going to be warm where we're going. So we'll have a Mustang convertible to drive around in, which will be kind of fun. But then I thought, you know, there's a national park not too far away that I've been to that she has not. How about we rent a motorcycle? We could rent a motorcycle. And for two people, get a big one, get like a GS 1100 or something kind of cool, and rent some helmets, or maybe even take our helmets down, and we'll rent it for a day, and we'll go through the national park. It'll be amazing, right? So then I went on to the local town, and I looked up motorcycle rentals, and of course the first one that pops up, they said, they have a tab, these are our rental bikes that you can choose from. I pulled it up, and it was a whole page of Harley Davidsons. And I looked at those things and I immediately was like, And I thought to myself, I would rather not ride a motorcycle than ride one of those things. So I gave up on the whole thing. I thought, well, if that's all they're offering, I would rather not, to be honest with you. I did go on to find another place that had some Royal Enfields and some different things that were kind of cool. But no. Not a fan. If that's your thing, man, that's fine. You know, you can't account for taste. And if it gives you the fizz, if you're into that culture and such, again, I could totally get behind a 68, 69 Panhead with 8 hangers and that. I mean, I hardtail, I could do that. But these other ones, man, no. I can't get with it. We have a super chat from Mr. Justin Poppy. Welcome. Thank you for your generosity, Justin. I appreciate that. Justin writes, I enjoy watching, he watched Sam's podcast. I enjoy watching you on Sam's podcast. Can't wait for a collaboration tier list. Also, you should give him some tips before their next camping trip. Well, man, I don't want to let the cat out of the bag here. Now, Sam is a cool guy. He's not going to compare. So I proposed something to General Sam. So we had actually, so after the podcast was over, you know, some of the best conversations that we had was actually when the live stream was over. And we stayed on for another hour, I'll bet. I was sitting right here in front of the fireplace, the wood stove, for another hour, Brian and Poob and I and General Sam, and had a good time just hanging out because it was taking my Starlink so long to render the files. It took like an hour for that to happen. So we were chatting and hanging out, we were giving Brian a hard time about this camping trip and his cheap gear and all that stuff. And so I suggested to Sam, I said, Sam, I don't know if you guys are you planning on doing another camping trip? He did a camping trip. What he did was very funny. It was was there 4 of them? 4 gamers with little to no skills got up out of their gaming chairs and went on a wilderness expedition, a hike up in the snow in Idaho, and it turned out to be an entire disaster, as you can imagine. So we were talking about this after the show and all that, and I said, Sam, are you planning on doing this again? Are you going to bring the gamers up and try to do that in another situation? And they were going to do that. And I said, well, I'll propose something to you. How about you guys fly out to Portland? I'll pick you up at PDX. We'll bring you up here will base camp you right here. You can go down by the campsite right on the river. You can guys get you lined up. Jack and I will put you in the truck with all your gear, and we'll take you wherever you want to go, because the Pacific Crest Trail basically runs right through our yard. The Pacific Crest Trail, we'll choose a section that you can go from point A to point B. You can tell me how many miles you want to cover, and I'll tailor make this for you so that we'll put you in. You'll go through some of the most beautiful country in the world, and we'll pick you up at the bailout point. I'll give you, and I was giving him a bunch of hard time about the mountain lions and stuff, so he was all scared about that. And I said, well, you just bring a gun. He's like, I can't travel with a gun. I said, well, I'll loan you a gun, give you a big 10 millimeter on a guide holster. I'll give you a satellite locator that you can text me if you get into trouble. And if worst case scenario, Jack and I will come in with a rescue mission on the 300s, and we'll help you guys get you out to safety, and everything will be controlled and you'll be able to do it. And he said they all said that sounded like a good idea. So I don't know if that will manifest, but that would be super awesome. So I did propose it, and they were very open to it. And so we'll see, but that would be fun. I would even, I hope Sam doesn't watch this. What would really be good is if we could know their locations, which I would have their locations because I put a tracker on them. And then we could go in and give them a little scare. Huh? It would make for good content, wouldn't it? But thank you, Justin. I haven't watched it. I don't know if I'll watch it now. It's always very cringe watching myself on those things. But I did see that it was up. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, so regarding the so one thing that I wanted to do with Sam was a collab. Their tier list. So they did a tier list. It was Jack and I, was one of our favorite episodes where they take it's such a Zoomer thing. They take all random animals. It can be like a deer, a grizzly, black bear, hippopotamus, and they do a podcast where if a gamer was armed with a bat, I think it was an aluminum bat, could you defeat this animal? And they put a ranking system in a tier list. And I got a big kick out of that. It was super funny from guys who don't know a lot about animals and how vicious they really are. I think they were somewhat optimistic as to their abilities to be able to take out some of these wild animals with a bat. And I asked a couple times that the next time that they do a tier list, that I could absolutely, if I could sit on that panel. I think that would be pretty fun. So go rattle General Sam's cage. Make sure he puts me on that panel the next time they do a tier list. We have a super chat from eccentric Aunt Wanda. Welcome, welcome, Wanda. That was my grandmother's name, Wanda. That's a very generous super chat as well. Thank you, brother. Absolutely no hate, but how much of this is real for you, and how much is to get a few bucks from the rubes? I don't know what a rube is. That said, your teaching is certainly worth something, to be sure, and you save me money buying body armor for my kid. You get what you see what you get here, man. You know, and here's the thing. People are not stupid. People are not stupid. You can tell when someone is genuine versus someone is not genuine. And it is impossible, unless you are the world's best actor. I have some 3,000 or better odd videos, or coming close to it, that I've uploaded on this platform and on others. Do you think that you can keep a story straight if you're lying, if you're deceiving? Can you keep a story straight over that? With people watching, with people hate watching, with people looking to pick holes in different things? It would be impossible. It'd be impossible for me. Now, have I been wrong on things and changed my opinion or changed my view in the 13 years of living on this planet and sharing all these things with you guys? I have. But I've also owned when I've made a mistake, and I've always done it publicly. So I don't have any skeletons in my closet here. I'm not grifting. I advertise on the channel. When I advertise, I tell you as much. I put affiliate links up in the subject heading. That supports us as well, and it's not out of anyone's pocket. People get salty and angry about that for some reason, I don't know. But people want affiliate links and such. So yeah, I don't know what to tell you. This is what's going on here, and I've just always shared it. It's the only way, man. I'm not smart enough to keep track of lies. So it wouldn't do me any good. I'd been found out years ago. But no, I appreciate that. There's no wrong questions here. Eccentric Aunt Wanda, I appreciate that. Thank you for supporting us, and I'm glad you got body armor. Good for you. There's a man that's eyes are open to what's going on. We have a member chat from the Northern Man. Welcome, Northern Man. The Northern Man, he's been with us for 2 months now. Shout out to the Northern Man. He asked, do you have any suggestions on socket holder organization for the toolbox? As a matter of fact, I do. What I'll do for you, Northern Man, is I'll shoot a little short video for members, and I'll show you how I do it. And I've tried lots of different things, and what I have now is the best. So I'll do a video for members only for you. So I won't speak to that right now, but I'll have that up for you. Thank you. Appreciate that. And we have a member message from Bryce Bergen. Welcome, Bryce. Glad to have you here. Bryce has been with us for almost 3 years. You're just about ready to receive that OG status. He says, why did you choose the Lucas mill rather than a bandsaw mill such as the Norwood or the Wood-Mizer? Because a couple reasons. It's portability. The Lucas gives you the ability to set up. One man to load up. You can carry the Lucas sawmill and load it up in the back of your truck just by yourself without a trailer. If you have a ladder rack, you can throw the runners up there, and the power head you can put the wheels on, and you can lift it up and put it in the back of your truck. So that's really appealing. Plus, you can cut huge, gigantic logs. And my idea always is I have kind of keep an ear to the ground around here if there's ever someone that's got some big, giant stuff down that are just too big to go to the mills, because the mills won't take anything over 32 inch. And so it either rots on the ground or turns into firewood. But the Lucas, because the way it's designed, you can set it up around the logs. And just less complicated and just simple. I like it. They're both very good. Now, I'm not the authority on this, but I have heard back from a lot of people that are doing this for a living. There's a bunch of dudes that have retired and have bought small sawmills, and they just make extra income. Just gives them something to do, and they cut lumber for people. And several of the dudes that do that professionally have told me they have both. And what they say is that the Lucas is actually, if you get good at it, is faster because it cuts in both directions. You can cut faster, but what everyone says, if you're just doing pure production day in and day out, that the Wood-Mizer is the way to go. The bandsaw is the way to go. The other thing I like about the Lucas a lot is to be able to self-sharpen it. That's a real bummer. When I was thinking of what's going to be the most user-friendly, what's going to give me the best abilities and options in a grid down situation, or if I needed to be as self-sufficient as possible, I can sharpen those myself in about 5 minutes. There's a grinder that comes with it. There's only 5 or 6 teeth. Resurface those things in just 3-4 minutes, 5 minutes tops, and you're up and cutting again. Versus the bandsaws, which you have to send in for sharpening, and that whole thing is a big bummer for me. Yes, you can get the equipment to sharpen yourself, but most don't. So those are some of the reasons. They're both good. I'd be happy with either one, but I do like the Lucas. I think it's pretty awesome. And they're cheaper. We have a super chat from Carter Francis for $9.99. Welcome, Carter. Thank you for your support. And because I'm Batman. Because I'm Batman writes, I'd personally appreciate it if you wouldn't be quite so critical of us East Coast guys. Of course you would. Don't agree with everything you say, but I'd say we have similar mindsets, ergo why I'm subscribed. Now, because I'm Batman, I want you to realize that this is all tongue-in-cheek. This is not intended to be mean whatsoever. The whole East Coast, West Coast thing started over a nasty East Coast comment. It all started back on the old homestead. See, West Coast man, he runs big chainsaw bars, minimum of 28 inch. 32 is ideal, but he'll even run 36. Big manly chainsaw bars on pro saws. Why? Well, a couple reasons. Because we have big trees. Biggest trees in the world are out here. Therefore, we need big saws. East Coast man, he runs short saws. He has a short bar. West Coast man has a long bar. East Coast man got all salty, telling me, you don't need those big long bars out here. Let me tell you, let me set you straight. We cut firewood, and we've cut firewood way longer than you have, and we can do everything that you can do with our little stubby bars. Who do you think you are, etc., etc., etc. Well, I responded, because I'm a petulant child, in a trolling video of making fun of East Coast guy, and it has started from that, and it's been going back and forth all along. So it's not real. It's not mean-spirited. It's just, that's what guys do. That's what you do when you're with your mates, when you're with your friends, when you like each other, is you rib each other back and forth. When you have mutual respect for one another, that's how guys operate. So don't be like a feminine woman or a feminine man by getting your feelings hurt over trolling and just good-natured ribbing back and forth between West Coast and East Coast guy. Don't get into your feelings over this. Understand what it is. That's how men operate. This is a common thing, getting your feelings hurt over this sort of thing that doesn't matter. It's a common thing you'll see of men that are raised by women that don't have a father in the household. And I don't know your case. I'm not insulting you. It's just, I want to make you guys aware of this, that this is what you slip into. You get highly emotional and you react when you don't think about it. That's why one of the big problems with violence, in my opinion, that we have in our Native American communities, why they act out and they're so violent towards one another, is that if you look at the percentage of them that are raised by women, by single mothers, and not having a man in the house to help them temper the emotions, temper the frustration that comes, and strictly reacting on emotion, that's why they're so violent. They have that feminine characteristic where they react immediately like women do, and unfortunately they're powerful young men with weapons, and the outcome is often deadly. So don't get up in your feelings. Just stay in your lane, East Coast man. Realize that you've been hobbled from birth, and do the best you can with what you have. I know you're limited, but we are pulling for you. We always love an underdog out west. Shout out to our East Coast friends. We have a super chat or a member message from Kim Brady. Shout out to you, Kim. Kim's been with us for 1 month. I never know if Kim is a man or a woman. That could go either way, that name. You have helped me more than you know. Thank you, Cody. I appreciate that, Kim. Thank you for your generosity. That's for hanging out with us and being a member. Goodness, you love to see it. And Kix Mechanic, welcome Kix Mechanic. A vendor, $20. I need to come up with something to do in honor of people that are so generous. There, how about that? Shout out, you get the $20 and above. You get the Microtech Flip. Maybe I should get a soundboard here like General Sam has. Kix Mechanic writes, East Coaster here, got mad love for you, brother. Well, the problem with West Coast man is he didn't get very good schooling, so we have trouble reading around here. Got mad love for you, brother. Just finished my journeyman ND, 20 college credits. I'm 30 with 1 kid. Should I continue my mechanical engineering associate's degree at the local community college in a field? 8 years. Kix Mechanic, I would love to address this. I do not have enough information and background. If you could send me an email, cody@wranglerstar.com, lay it out kind of what's going on. I'm not professing to have the answers, but we can bring it before Proho here, and we can come up with, we can help you to make a good decision. But shout out to you for, at 30, still being a new wineskin, willing to put the work in and go back to school and to better your life. So I don't know. I can't speak to that. I wish I had more information here. What I'm gleaning from this is you just finished your journeyman ND. I don't know what ND is. 20 college credits. I'm 30 with 1 kid. Should I continue my mechanical engineering? If you can get any sort of a certification in that field, mechanical engineer or become an engineer. Those are going to be very, very coveted positions. So I would say yes, man. If you can just grind, and if you're going to school at work and just keep doing it, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel, then absolutely. I mean, you've went this far, why give it up? Now, if you're just in the beginning stages and you're not digging it, and you don't think that that's a trade you want to work in, well, there's nothing progressive about continuing to go down the wrong way. You might need to make a course correction. But if that's what you like, and that's the plow that you put your hand to, then of course, see it out. But if you want to expand on that, send me an email. Sean Hill, and 1 month member, we have a super chat. Shout out to Mr. Jonathan Hill. Jonathan Hill, sorry. Happy early birthday. My birthday is also tomorrow. Man, we have 2 April 1st birthdays. It was a cruel trick. Being raised, having April 1st your birthday, that's April Fool's Day. I remember so many times, and this never got old, trust me, never gets old. Coming home and having a massive pile of gifts, bigger than my sister's pile, only to have 2/3 of them being gag gifts. Yeah, I know. It's hilarious. It's hilarious, especially after 50 years of it. It gets even funnier. Shout out to Jonathan, and happy birthday to you tomorrow. We have a super chat from Isaiah. Isaiah says, the worst part is most of those guys with road glides can barely turn. Yeah, those road glides in particular. So I used to listen to Dr. Laura when I was doing my Jeep parts. I had some guys that worked for me. I did everything for years, but later on, I've spent most of my time in front of the computer. I had a standing desk, and I'd be listing parts, taking pictures of parts, managing inventory, shipping, all that stuff. And I used to listen to Dr. Laura on the radio. Listened to her for years. This would have been like 2006, 7, 8, right around there. And I remember the time that I stopped listening to her, and it had to do with a Harley-Davidson motorcycle. I'll never forget the call. She gave such bad advice that even though I was a fan of Dr. Laura, that was it, and I haven't listened to her since. Mrs. W and I still talk about this wretched advice that she gave to this poor, hand-picked man. A man calls her up and says, Dr. Laura, I want to buy a motorcycle. I've always wanted a motorcycle. I've dreamed of having one. My wife won't let me have a motorcycle. Well, red flag right there. Proho isn't dictated. His decisions to buy or not to buy is not dictated by the wants of his woman. Let's get that thing straight. Proho doesn't go and ask for. Proho doesn't do 3 things. He doesn't drink from a straw, not in public anyway. He doesn't hold his woman's purse or bags in public like a simp. And he certainly doesn't seek permission to go out and do things with his friends or make purchases that he has planned and responsibly decided to do. Now, with that being said, of course, Mrs. W and I, we respect one another. And if she needs to make a major purchase, i.e. something over several $100s, and the same for me, I'm going to give her the respect. She's going to give me the respect to make sure, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Do you have any concerns or issues? Do you have any insights to this? Mutual respect. But when I want to buy something, I'm damn well going to go buy it, right? Well, I'm not going to be seeking approval of my wife. But I'm also not going to be stupid and buying something that's going to bankrupt my family, out of selfishness. So there's a responsibility with leadership. So this guy calls up. He's not Proho, and his wife won't let him get the Harley that he wants. So Dr. Laura says, well, is your wife there? Well, yes, she's there. Well, why don't you put her on the phone, and we'll get a 3-way phone conversation going on here to come up with a solution. Okay, so she comes on. Dr. Laura asks her questions. She expresses her concern, the danger, women are risk averse, all these things. And if you're not careful, they'll neuter you. That's why you have to be careful. They are risk averse. We need to be taking risks. That's how we keep testosterone flowing. That's how we remain masculine and a little bit dangerous. If we don't remain a little bit dangerous and unpredictable, our women will become quickly tired of us. We need to keep them on the back foot. Keep them on the back foot so they never really know where they stand. If they become too familiar with you, they'll lose respect. They'll start looking for someone else that's dangerous. Many of them will. So Dr. Laura hears both sides, and she comes up with a solution. She says, okay, well, this is simple. So what you're going to do is you're going to buy a Harley-Davidson trike. You know, trike, the three-wheel one. There's always, and it was so funny because she's laying out how, you know, from a woman's perspective, like completely ignorant of what a fool this man is going to look riding around on a Harley-Davidson trike. And making the argument for this and what a good idea it is because she had considered getting a trike. So because she had considered getting a trike as a female, she thought that that was just naturally she would project out upon this guy. This was a brilliant solution. And you can hear the whole time, he's like, he's not having it. He's like, you know, he doesn't have, it was funny. But that advice of her, that she thought that was a solution, that a grown man would be riding around on a Harley-Davidson trike, was just too much for me, and I turned it off and I haven't listened since. What does that have to do with anything? Why am I sharing that story? I don't know. Isaiah, yes, I agree. Yeah, they can barely turn them, and they're if they, Lord help them if they drop it on the ground, they're certainly not going to pick up that big pig. Goodness, I'm not a fan. But if you just claim that they give you the fizz, then that's the end of the argument. Then I have nothing else to say. If you like what you like. Like I like Knight's Armament buffer tubes, which I don't have, but I like them. I just like what I like, even though it doesn't make sense. Our friend Jamie's back. Welcome, Jamie. Good to see you here. Jamie has been with us for 2 months. Jamie writes, what is your favorite kind of Gatorade? Anything that is not Riptide Rush is not correct. Have a good weekend, Cody. All the best. Gatorade is poison. Gatorade, energy drinks are poison. Alcohol is poison. All these things are not good for you. Look at the ingredients. It's nothing but what it is a soft drink in drag. I mean, it has the sugar content. It's not value. Don't drink that garbage. Don't drink that garbage. Power drinks, energy drinks, it saddens me to see these beautiful young men in the peak of life and working construction and everything and coming out of these convenience stores, and that's all they drink. Don't drink water. All they do is drink Gatorade and these energy drinks. Don't have but if I had to pick one, without a doubt, orange. But don't drink any of them. Red Bull probably killed our friend Sam, what was his name? Who's the guy that was the relationship guy that was blowing up 6 months ago? Help me out here. Goodness, he was on the internet. Mrs. W and I watched him. Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. Help me. The delay. It'll come to me. But he drank Red Bull, and that probably killed him, if it wasn't the deep state. We have a member message from Eric Luchtenberg. Shout out to you, Eric. Eric has a comment. Eric writes, Iowa man, logger, I bought a job that landowner gave us a good referral for his neighbor. See, your spelling is just like mine. I should be able to read it better. The neighbor called my partner. He cut me out of the job. Man, yeah. You know, when you're a high trust person like you are and like I am, we are easy prey for scoundrels because we don't think that way. We don't go into enterprises with the idea that we're going to screw someone or cheat them out of something, and so we often get blindsided. But, you know, I don't know what to say, man. Just move on and learn from it. Just be wiser from that. But how many times should we forgive our neighbor, Christ said, as hard as this is? Peter came up and said, how many times should I forgive my friend that sins against me? Should I forgive him 7 times? If I gave him 7 times, will that make me a good saint? Christ said, no, not 7 times, 7 times 70. It's not a number. It's just making the point that continue to do it. So, yeah, that's rough, brother. I'm sorry, man. Move on. Now you know that who you don't deal with. And never trust anyone that betrays you, especially with women. I got a comment this morning, or a long message this morning to my email that I may or may not share with you guys in future podcasts, but it was regarding betrayal. It was a young couple, about early 20s or so, and betrayal had come into this on the girl's side. And she had maybe or maybe not went all the way through with it, or she at least claimed that she hadn't realized the errors of her ways, and came back home and said, really, all I want is you. I mean, to make a long story short. But also, there was a history in high school of similar lying and betrayals. And he wanted to know that because she's so repentant and she feels bad for what she did, would I be right in accepting her back into my life? Should I maintain this relationship? And they weren't yet married yet, but I think maybe he was considering it. I've been thinking about this. I haven't responded yet, but my initial thought is absolutely not. A betrayal of that sort of infidelity is inexcusable, in my opinion. You know, it's one of the, in the good book, it's one of the few things, one of the very few things that God allows, that the Bible, that the New Testament allows to dissolve a marriage. You can put away a wife if she's been caught, if she's been unfaithful. So that's a very, even the good book recognizes that that is something that is very serious. So if you're seeing these characteristics once, twice, three times, she's for the streets. She's not suitable for marriage material. Now, can people change? Yeah, of course they can change. But are you going to bet your children and your future financial stability and access to your children, you're going to bet that on someone that's made for the streets? I wouldn't. I wouldn't. And I would never forgive a woman that betrayed me and took my trust that I had taken care of and provided for. If she cheated on me, I would throw her out immediately. It would be, there's no redemption from that. I could never look at her. I could never look at her the same way. That's a bridge too far. We have a super chat from ZTJ1611, who's been with us for 1 year, writes, I just got a good set of socket holders from Cornwell. Relatively inexpensive, best ones I've ever had. They are magnetic and will not break. Yeah, and that's what I found. I bought the cheap ones. I bought the Harbor Freight ones. I've went through all of them and they all were trash. If you want the good stuff, you got to go to where the good stuff is, and that is going to be on the tool trucks. Mac, Snap-on, what was this brand? Cornwell. Yeah, Cornwell's a good brand. SK, that sort of thing. Buy what the mechanics buy. Those guys don't tolerate low quality stuff. They use it every day. That 10 millimeter socket's going in and out of that holder a bazillion times a month. It's got to hold up and last. So I finally broke down and bought Snap-on socket holders, and they're the best I've had. But I'll share that with you members. I'll have that for you up here today. We're here. Oh, Mr. Dr. Prepper is back. Dr. Prepper says, who makes a decent tool roll that will accommodate odd tools and sockets? I have some Carhartts that aren't bad, but would like options to customize. Man, Dr. Prepper, I don't know about that. I can only speak on what I have. I have 2 tool rolls, or 3. I have 2 of the Carhartt rolls, and I like those. Those are pretty good, but I hear what you're saying. I don't trust them. They don't have like zipper pouches for oddball things that you can, if you were to turn the thing upside down, you feel like it would evacuate itself. That's what I don't like about those deals. I have not had that happen before, but it does cross my mind when I look at it. The other one I have, which is much higher end and really nicely designed, is made by Moscow Moto in Washington. Actually, I know the guy that, Pete, I know the guy that runs the company. I have a bunch of his gear. Great company. super high quality. It's geared for motorcycles, adventure bikes and such, but it's the same principle. So those are really durable. Whenever you have tool rolls or tool storage that's designed for the adventure motorcycle market, dirt bikers, hard enduro, that stuff takes such a beating that it's got to be made way, way better than anything else. So that's a good avenue to go to if you're looking for, if you want the best. I would look at the Moscow Moto. I have one. That's the one that I use in my truck, and it's excellent. It has lots of pouches, the zipper pouches for oddball things. It's very good. So go look up the Moscow Moto tool roll. And in addition to that, it's waterproof, or if you use the cover, it comes with a special cover, a sleeve that you put it in, and when you roll it up, it's 100% waterproof. And I have found that to be very helpful, because when I pulled the tool roll out, I'll pull it out, and now you have a good-sized kneeling pad that you can stay dry on and keep your clothes clean when you're down trying to untangle barbed wire or get a rock out of your brake disc heat shield, whatever. Also, I don't know the tool roll status, but I would also check into a company called Giant Loop. Giant Loop is out in Bend, Oregon, and I have some of their stuff as well, and their stuff is excellent, super excellent, and that might be an option as well. That's where I'd go if you want a good quality one that can be waterproof. We have super chat from Bantha Fodder. Shout out to you. Welcome. Thank you. And a new member, ZTJ1611. Good to see you back. Thank you. Welcome. He writes, West Coast man must always trace their ancestry back east. Now, why did you have to go and say that? That's true, but I was born here. I was born here. I'm a native. Love you. Praying for you and your family from Maryland, farming, Eastern Shore, and in the beautiful Chesapeake Bay. Man, it is beautiful. I was fortunate. I got to spend a couple months in Laurel, Maryland, right outside of D.C., and on my weekends, many weekends, I went into Baltimore. And I don't know that Baltimore was quite as gritty as it is now, but I went down and I would spend my weekends down at the Inner Harbor. And I would go down there and I would eat the best clam chowder in a chowder bowl. That's one thing the East Coast man, he does know how to do. He does make some darn good clam chowder in a sourdough bread bowl. Oh, have mercy. Goodness. With those oyster crackers, goodness. East Coast man knows all about that. But the Inner Harbor at the Chesapeake Bay was absolutely extraordinary. You know, I like maritime stuff, and I think it's very interesting. But I remember going into a bar. I saw, being a small town boy and being released out into the world, the big city for the first time, I was seeing things that I'd never seen before. And when I was in Baltimore, Maryland, I'll never forget, I went into a bar in the Inner Harbor, and there was a cannonball from the War of Independence with the British that was still in the side of the building, that had lodged in the brick that had been fired from a British ship of the line. Fascinating. You know, we don't have that out west. That type of history is quite interesting. Shout out to Maryland, man. I do hold you in a little bit higher regard than I would, let's say, New Jersey, man. Thank you for that. Thank you for your generosity. In Dystopian World, we have a super chat. Thank you. As we enter into the dystopian world, we have a super chat from Bantha Fodder. He writes, do you still love Benchmade 940? And what about the meat diet? Oh, I love both. Yes, the 940. I'm only carrying the Spyderco or the Microtech because it was a gift from one of the middlemen. And it's my inside knife, my going around house. I do love it. I have the 940 there in my drawer. And I also have this one, and I've been grabbing this one because I do love it. Would I trade it for the 940 if I could only have one? No, I wouldn't. When I leave the house, I don't take this typically. When I leave the house, I take the 940 because I don't like the pocket clip. I lose knives with pocket clips. So I'm careful to use this in only very select locations because it's such a beautiful knife. But yes, regarding meat diet, yeah, meat is on my diet every meal. I don't just eat meat. but mostly. But mostly. You know, you got to eat right for your blood type. And what works for you and what works for me and different people is different. You just know your body. You listen to your body. It'll tell you what you need. And if you detest vegetables and the bitter root, so to speak, as the old book tells us, that you know, there is something to be said for that. That if that never has resonated with you, it could just be that your body just doesn't dig it and craves other things. So don't let people tell you, and certainly don't abide by the government food pyramid. If you want to see nonsense and fakery, that is not there for your health, to be certain. I was going to expand on that. Meat. Oh, I'm also, whenever I meet someone that gives me a hard time about there's not enough green on my plate, I do remind them, and I'm on solid biblical ground here, the bitter herb, which is, i.e., any vegetables, were introduced to man's diet after sin. There was no bitter herb. There were no salads. Well, not vegetable salads anyway. There were no salads, vegetable bitter salads, in the Garden of Eden. Nor will they be in the kingdom. But the fresh fruit. So take that, vegetarian. Eat your salad in sin. We have a super chat from Kaysen McClung. Kaysen's been with us for 1 month. I think Kaysen was here yesterday, or was it earlier today? Kaysen is a private pilot. Now that's cool. What are your thoughts on having a lightweight sports aircraft for a bug-in situation? Well, why do you think that I made sure I moved into a place with an airport next door? Or let me say airport, loose term, a landing strip. A landing strip. I think it's a very good situation. Now, with that being said, are the powers that be going to allow you to fly around unregulated? Maybe, maybe not. So having the skill to be able to do that's imperative, but also having a very stealthy craft, use your cleverness to come up with how can I operate under the radar, so to speak? How can I utilize the skill without having to operate within the tyranny of an over-regulated, tyrannical government? That's what you need to figure out so you can be a benefit to Proho in the future. Maybe you can use my landing strip. We have a super chat from Mr. Isaiah. But shout out to you for having a private pilot's license. I mean, that's cool. That's something I always regret. I do regret not doing. I started it. I got into skydiving. I did skydiving for quite a while. Got into that. And kind of when you get into skydiving, I think it's kind of a natural progression to you're exposed to small aircraft and pilots, and you kind of start thinking about that. And my friend and I took a couple check rides, and I think he eventually soloed and got his private. I've lost track of him, but I never did. I kind of started it, and I just didn't have the time to do it. I should have done it. Our friend Isaiah, welcome, is in the chat. Isaiah writes, "Sheesh, the only thing worse than a beginner on a road glide is a road glide trike." Yeah, can you imagine? Can you imagine that? Yeah, dude was not happy. Dude was not happy with Dr. Laura's recommendation, and you could just hear through the wavelengths of the radio, you know, of her nodding and the wife getting on board. Oh, this is a great. As the two of them are publicly emasculating the poor man on public radio, nationally syndicated. It was shameful. We have a super chat from Isaiah. Shout out to you, Isaiah. What body armor? What about body armor? Yeah, I've got, I would direct you, Isaiah. Last week we did a couple videos on practical body armor for the common man. Maybe some things to consider, maybe some things not to consider. The mistakes, I shared the mistakes that I learned and what I would do now if I was starting from scratch. So go over there and watch those. They're on the main channel, Wranglerstar.com, from last week. And that's going to should answer most of your questions, at least give you something to think about so you can make an informed decision. We have a super chat from We Appreciate How Much Effort You Put Into These Videos. Good to see you back. The longest name in the chat. What is your experience with sport street bikes? Just bought my first bike, an 08 Ninja 650. My first fast bike was a Honda V45 Magna. That's a V4, that's a cruiser style bike, but I'll tell you, back in the day, that bike was fast. That was among the fastest bikes. That was right around when the first Top Gun came out. So I think, what did he ride in that? Was it like a 900 Ninja? So the Ninjas were in the showrooms. My bike was a 1983 V45 Magnum, and that was actually back in that day. That was a fast bike. It was a very fast bike. Still is fast. I mean, not by today's standards, but I had that when I was 17. Now that was right when Honda introduced the 500 Interceptor. That was like the first small, affordable sports bike, and they were everywhere. All the young guys and military guys and guys out of school bought those. They were just ubiquitous. They were everywhere, and they thought they were super fast because it's lunch. I raced so many of those dudes, and you just pull away from them. That thing pulled. It was hard. It pulled hard. I used to race it. I used to drag race it at a Woodburn drag strip at the quarter mile. I used to race that in my Challenger. Then got into a V65, which was the big boy, into a Sabre, and that was a fast bike. And then I went a different direction, and once I got rid of that, I went into the old British bike. So when I was out and out of the house and single, and the bar scene and clubbing and all of that, I rode. I was in like a motorcycle gang with my friends, and we rode old British bikes. And I still have mine. It's basket case in the Connex. I'm debating whether to put it back together or just get rid of it. It's a 1968 BSA Lightning twin, 650 twin. Super cool. Low, I think it had 4,000 miles on it when I bought it original. All original blue with a chrome tank. Very, very cool. What we wanted when we were, like, this would have been like early 20s when I was riding this around. My buddy had a BSA, a couple other guys had Triumphs, but they were all vintage. Late 60s, Norton Commanders, that sort of thing. It was super, super cool because it was unique. It wasn't anything had. That's what we wanted. We wanted to have something that was cool. The Harley was done. We didn't like the connotation of it. We didn't like the type of people that rode it. We weren't hard like the real bikers, like the Gypsy Jokers or the Hell's Angel guys. We weren't into that scene, but we wanted to have something that was our own and unique, and that's what we kind of settled on. So we rode the British bikes. I almost wadded up and killed myself the first time I was on that bike. To this day, the whole thing just flashed in front of my eyes just thinking about it. So if you don't know, on a British motorcycle, the shifter and the foot brake are switched. I was not aware of this when I bought it. It was like on the Cycle Trader or Auto Trader. It was up in Northwest Portland in a warehouse. I went up there, I had cash. My dad dropped me off, started the thing up, kickstart, of course, and took off, headed into the city. Well, it dawned on me right away, like, oh, so the shifter and the brake are different. Okay, good to know. Make a mental note of that. Well, I rolled down into downtown off an off-ramp, and the guy pulled in front of me and slammed on the brakes. When you get into a panic situation, you revert back to muscle memory, which was the normal, brake on the right-hand side, shifter on the left. Well, man, I hit the shifter, and I couldn't find the brake, and I almost killed myself. I almost wadded up and smacked into that guy. But that cured me, and I never forgot that one again. So not so much. The 650, the BSA 60, it was a 68. Yeah, 68 650 single carb. The Lightning has a single carb. The Thunderbolt has a dual carb. I have a Lightning. After that, I got into, let's try to think, did I have a street bike after that? No. I got into dirt bikes. I started buying KTMs. That was my first KTM was a 450 EXC. And then I've done KTMs or Husqvarnas ever since. We have a super chat from Mr. Kim Brady. He's been with us for 1 month, $50. Goodness, shout out to you, Kim. That's very, very generous of you. Thank you so much. Happy birthday. By the way, I'm a man members. I'm a man. Members, oh good. I'm a man. Welcome, Kim. Yep. Not casting shade. I've always liked the name Kim. I think it's a cool guy's name. I think it's a better name for a man than for a woman. Shout out to Kim. Goodness, thank you. That's very generous of you. I sure do appreciate that. The best folks in the world are subscribed to this channel. Thank you. Kevin Samuels. Good grief. Kevin Samuels drank Red Bull, too much Red Bull, and it may have been that, or it may have been something more nefarious. He was reaching too many people that our friends in the government need to keep on the plantation. He was waking up too many people, too dangerous. Keep me in your prayers too. Speaking of falling into that camp, I will never, ever, ever, ever delete myself. So avenge me, beloved. We have a super chat from Fusion, but I wear the armor of God. We have a super chat from Fusion Nevo. Kevin Samuels is the name you were thinking of. Yep, that's it. That's it. And Jeremy Neal, our newest member. Welcome, Jeremy. You are very much appreciated. Thank you. And we have a super chat from Ryan Warren. Ryan's been with us for a month. Ryan writes, I have a wrestling. Public education rears its ugly head. I have Westling machine socket trays. Now, I'm not familiar with that brand. It's spelled W-E-S-T-L-I-N-G. I'm assuming Proho knows what he's talking about. Made in USA, machined aluminum. Oh, those sound fancy. They are pretty affordable, but most importantly, it gives me the fizz. Yeah, I can't help myself. Can I show you what gives me the fizz? No, I'm going to save it for members. The socket tray I have gives me the fizz too. It was expensive, but it's super, super good. It's the big, well, members only. Look into that. I don't need any more, so I'm not even going to look, because then I'm going to be discontented with what I have. So I'm going to be careful and just do that. So I don't want to know how good yours is compared to mine. Because I'm Batman is back. Welcome. I poked you in the side. You broke my jaw. I keep getting accused of punching down. I didn't mean to do that to you because I'm Batman. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You know, I'm telling you, East Coast man, he doesn't know his place, and it's what every once in a while I have to put him in his place. You know, my granddad used to say, he had a joke. He would joke in front of my grandmother. It was so absurd is what made it fun. It's what made it funny. My grandmother, my ability to have the gift of gab, Overton was like, good grief, how could any man possibly talk like you do for 3 hours the other day? I get it from her. She wore my dad out for no end, the mother-in-law, because she talked all the time. I grew up with her. That's probably where I got it. My granddad was a man of few words. When he said something, he meant it, and it usually was worth saying, right? So every once in a while he'd say, yeah, about your grandmother. He goes, I got to keep her in line. He goes, I keep a logging chain in the closet, and once a year or so I have to pull that logging chain on, and I rattle it up and down the hallway just to let her know who's in charge around here, you know, implying that he might have to straighten her out with this logging chain, which was so absurd. He was such a kind and gentle man that the thought of it was absolutely preposterous. And she would smile, and he would smile, and they always got along well. They had a very good marriage. But sometimes, point I'm making, East Coast man, he gets out of his lane, and I got to grab that logging chain, and I got to rattle that up and down the aisles a few times to get him back in his lane. You know, we're all about keeping one another honest. Shout out to East Coast man. I hope you don't abandon us. I appreciate you being here. Mr. Daniel Goodzek has been with us, a member for 2 months. Shout out to you. Daniel says, happy birthday, Cody. Have a good weekend. I am. Mrs. W is so excited. As I told you, I booked a mystery, a short, extended weekend. Speaking of which, just so you know, Proho, we will not be live streaming Monday and Tuesday. We're going to be on the road. So I'll put that up on the members page just to remind folks. But I will not be here. We decided we're going to not be on social media. We're not going to take any work with us. I'm not going to try to upload content. We're just going to put our phones in our Faraday bags, and we're going to have 4 days together with no children and no nothing. So I ask your pardon for a couple days, and then Lord willing, we'll be back. I believe we'll be on Wednesday. But thank you, Daniel. Thank you for your super chat, and thank you for wishing happy birthday. Member message from Dylan Henry. Dylan's been a member with us for 2 months now. He writes, he bought a 1997 Suzuki DR350 Dual Sport. That's a good choice. 2 years ago, best purchase I've made. It's a tractor that will take me anywhere I want to go. It is. A 1997, that's going to be a 350, perfect size. Proho realizes that bigger is not always better when it comes to these motorcycles, I tell you. I have all these dudes that I ride with that are just pressing me to get into the adventure bike thing, these big behemoths, with the bags and all that stuff. Man, I just can't get with it. It does not appeal to me. I got on one and I rode it. It was so heavy, and I was on my 300 at the time. This was on the BDR trip, and one of the guys that went along with us for a few legs of the route had a big one of those bikes, and he let me ride his. I turned it around and brought it back. I'm not interested in that, man. I don't want that. I don't want those big bikes. I want something small and simple. I want the purest form of motorcycling, and that's dual sport dirt bikes, no doubt. And that's a perfect example right there. You can get you could get that DR. It's a 350, even a 250 is just fine. If you're a bigger guy, just put a heavier spring on it. Get your spring sag set properly. You can go to a suspension guy, do that. If you can't do it yourself, it's not expensive. You can do it yourself, very easy. It's to compensate your size, get it set up for you, learn how the suspension works. The clickers are not witchcraft. You can learn them. It's not that complicated. Rebound, compression, just watch some videos, get it set up, put some good tires on it, put some good grips on it. Don't overlook your points of contact on a motorcycle. That's often like secondary thought. People put all this bling and all this nonsense on their bikes. Where you really should be considering it is number one is going to be your tire selection. Tire selection is critical. Tire selection, balance your wheels. You can balance them yourself. I balance my own right here in the shop with a long bolt and some brass weights. It's simple to do. It's the same way they've been balancing race motorcycle wheels forever. You can do it yourself. Good tires, balance your wheels. Your points of contact are important, especially when you're riding hard enduro and such. How are you touching the bike? How are you interfacing with it? Grips. Your grips should be new and sticky, comfortable, and regularly replaced, like you replace your underwear. Don't wear old grips and stuff. That stops shock. It keeps you on the bike. It's your main connection to the bike. Well, your knees, your body, your legs should be, but it's a big part. Levers, have that nice. Keep that fresh and nice. Your pegs, good pegs you can stand on that are bigger and comfortable. A good seat that you can grip and is comfortable. Those points of contact where you're interfacing with the machine are very important, very important. Next, after you get that all sorted out, put some money into suspension. A custom suspension is having it custom tuned and valved to your riding style and weight is some of the best money I've ever invested. I've never rode a bike with custom suspension until Candy, which I did last year, and I kicked myself for not doing it at the very beginning. It's critical. But these DRZs, you can get on them. They're bulletproof. They're gonna ride. You can change the oil once a year. They just go and go and go. And man, what a perfect vehicle for a bug out vehicle. We have a new member, Manny Paul. welcome. Our newest member, brand new baby member, welcome. Our friend and East Coast man, I'm Batman is back. You had a valid point. I was wrong. I accept that, man. I didn't fully understand and let my hummingbird mouth get in front of my jaybird behind. Yeah, man, you know what? You're in good company here. I suffer from that same thing. And it was not to be meant personal, but you know, we need to be, I wasn't going to share this with you, but I will share it with you. We need to have a swift kick in the behind from time to time. We really do. None of us are exempt from that. You get into a way of thinking, and it's not necessarily our fault. When you're constantly surrounded by beta males and females and estrogen, and a media that wants to drive the masculinity out of you, you think that doesn't have an effect on you? You can't be vigilant all the time. Those feminine ways and that beta mentality will creep into you if you don't deliberately recognize it for what it is. And there's no better way of curing yourself around that than being around the presence of other masculine men, because they won't tolerate it. They will call you on it and embarrass you. Like you start to show up wearing something that a man should not be wearing, or you're grabbing onto the latest fashion or what have you that you've seen online. Your friends will murder you if they're good friends, right? You won't wear that again. You'll come correct, right? So that's what we do here. I got a talking to this morning from a very wise member and a man, obviously, of very strong faith. And he took me to task in a very well written and very well received on my end. I didn't want to hear it, but I heard it. Criticism on maybe some of the things that topics I've been covering, or how I've been covering them, my use of language, attitude, etc., how it is not becoming of a man that is professing to be a follower of the way. And when I first started reading it, I thought, oh, here we go. And I quit reading it because if I was going to be honest, I knew, the guy's probably got some points there. I could kind of see where he was going, but I didn't want to hear it. So I didn't delete it, but I just put it aside. Like, maybe I'll come back to this, maybe I don't. This morning I went back to it. Didn't want to. It was a hard thing to read. Didn't want to. And it wasn't done out of maliciousness, but was also not pulling any punches. It was very honest, and it was very true. Slipping with the language. I thought about that. He said, I've said more, I've used more foul language in the last 6 months or last few months on this live stream than I have in the entirety of my channel. And when he brought that up to me, I stopped and I considered why are you doing that? You don't speak that way in public. You don't speak that way, certainly you don't speak that way in your home. Why are you doing this here? And I thought, my initial thought was, I'm trying to be relatable to young people. I'm trying to not be sanctimonious and one of those holy rollers that guys can't relate to. And I want them to understand, I came up the same way. I came up in the trades. I came up talking like that. I get it. I thought I was trying to be relatable. But then, I think the point that he was getting at was, when you're in this position, where you have a platform, where people have expectations and they're looking up to this, or looking to this some people are looking to this, what we're doing here, as an example, right or wrong. You have to be better. You have to set that example, and lowering yourself down to try to be relatable is not necessarily the best way to go, even though it's maybe done with the right intention. And I think he made the point that, or I don't know if he made the point, but what I gleaned from it was the standard needs to be maintained, and bring people up. Bring people up to the standard. We're bringing each other up to the standard. Don't go down in there and regress. So it was a very hard thing to read, and he really tore my heart out with the last sentence, in that, just laying these things out, taking to tasks some stances, some things that I've said that were maybe not correct scripturally, and to be careful with that, which I agree. and also wrapping the whole thing up by saying something to the effect of what you're doing matters to a lot of people, especially to a particular, I think it was a 19-year-old that I know. So coming away from that, I realized I don't know if it was his son or someone that he was acquainted with, a young man that obviously looks up to what we're doing here, is using this as an example. And this was really hurting him, this man who wrote this to me was wanting me to understand this, and that I have an obligation to maintain a certain standard here. So don't feel bad. I'm Batman. I got the smack down myself, and I took it to heart. So rather than taking offense, which was my default position, I just responded with thank you. I will take this to heart. Basically, I don't remember what I said. Something short. I'll take this to heart and come correct. Basically, that's what my intention is. So let us not get too big for our britches around here, any of us. Thank you, because I'm Batman. No shade, man. Just absolute love over here, and we hope to see you tomorrow. Well, not tomorrow. Hope to see you next Wednesday. We have a super chat from Georgi Kopani. I'm going to assume that you're not from around these parts. Shout out to you. He writes, love the channel. Love you. I would recommend for everyone who needs a real father figure. Thanks for being here for the people without dads. Yeah, that's my heart's really my heart's really there as well. I just didn't appreciate what I had growing up. I can see it so clearly now, especially with my grandfather, how much he meant to me. I wish nothing more, beloved. I wish we had him for a year. I wish we could sit right here by this cat and this wood stove, him and I, and that beautiful old man, and deal with all of these problems and come up with solutions for this. What an example that man was. What an example. The greatest man I ever knew. We have a super chat from our friend Isaiah. Shout out to you, Isaiah. Good to see you back. Isaiah writes, what's impressive is the guys that can ride road glides like they're a BMX bike. Yeah, I've seen some dudes like that. So in my younger years, I did kind of get involved with some guys on the fringes of a very dangerous motorcycle club. Now, I need to preface this. I was never any part of this. I wouldn't have been hard enough to have been accepted with these guys or criminal enough. But I was in contact with maybe some of the dudes that rode with some of these dudes, the Gypsy Jokers, if you know them. They're a pretty hard motorcycle group out here west, very hard, very dangerous. I'd not cast any shade on any of those guys. I'd just as soon not get involved. But I rode was around, some of these guys a little bit for a few years, and I remember riding with some of those guys like you talk about on these big clapped out Harleys. And I was on my BSA at the time, and these dudes were just insane. It was just common. These guys would lay these bikes over on these rides that we would go on so hard that just sparks would just be flying. I don't know what's dragging, the pipes, the center stand, what have you. And they would lower them. I remember one guy had one so lowered one of the hard guys had one so low. I was looking at his bike, and they were always nice to me. I was just a kid looking at it, and it's like, man, that is really cool, man. That's really low. He's like, yep. And he goes, that's even lower than God said it could be. I'll never forget that. And he was always dragging and making sparks on that thing, but it was cool. It was cool. Those guys are pretty hard, man. Pretty hard. Welcome, Georgi. Also a new member. Welcome, welcome. We have a member chat from Old Heart, our friend Old Heart. Shout out to you. Old Heart's been with us for 5 months, but I think he's been around some time longer. He says, I'm proud of you, Cody. Don't let the language or drinking harm your testimony. Keep growing to be and become more Christ-like every day. I agree. But also in defense, let's not lose the big picture here about the vulgar language. Let's talk about the language, for example. Now, I don't advocate it. I'm not justifying what I say, but I do agree with this man that it doesn't have a place. It's just not necessary. It's low class, and it's just not necessary. But sometimes the old saints who have never been out in the world or never been exposed to this or didn't grow up in the trades, they can build this, something like language, up to be a demon that it maybe necessarily doesn't need to be. That it's so shocking to them when they hear it, it's very offensive to them. But you take the guys that are in the trenches or working in the trades, vulgarity is the vulgar, it basically means the common tongue, the common language. What is commonly used among the laymen, commonly used among the tradesmen, the working people, the working class, the lower, whatever you want to call it. It's common. It doesn't have the shock value with them. Now, is that because that they're so desensitized from it from using? Yeah, of course it does, but I don't know. Maybe there's a place. Maybe in an extreme situation where you really need to make a point, I don't know that it's entirely a salvational issue. Should it be something that you work out of your vocabulary? Should we be a peculiar people, those of us that are soldiers in Christ, standing out, being an example to the world? We should. We should. But is there also a time in a man's ministry or in his life where he needs to somewhat conform to be accepted into a group or relatable to the folks that he's trying to reach with the truth? That's my question. I don't know that I have an answer for that. Paul talked about this. When Paul was sent out to bring the gospel to the Gentiles, he said something that's really important. He said, I'm all things to all people. To the Greek, a Greek. To a Jew. Meaning that he was a social chameleon. That's how he effectively evangelized. When he was speaking with the Greeks, he wasn't being a pious Jew. The Jews would have looked at him and said, look, he's lowering his standards. Look, he's not doing the washing of the pots. He's eating on the Sabbath day. He's unclean because he didn't follow these ceremonial procedures that we so rigorously adhere to. Well, why was he not doing that? Well, he would have put them off. He had a message, a life-saving, life-changing message, which is the knowledge of the Savior has come, of the gospel. But he also, to a Greek, I'm a Greek. What does that mean? We have to read in between the lines on that. Did that mean he forsook everything that meant to be Jewish? Because it would have been off-putting to the Greeks. They wouldn't have understood it. It would have been very foreign. So I don't know. I don't know. That's an individual thing that you'll have to decide, that I'll have to decide. I don't take offense to this man taking the time to write. I think a man that takes the time to do that only does it because he cares, realizes that this is a problem, and obviously an older, more stable, wiser man than me, and I'm willing to receive rebuke and correction. But I also want to make sure that just because he said it doesn't necessarily mean it's all true. And I also want him to understand, if he's listening, what my motivation is. It's not to be irreverent. It is an attempt to be relatable. Does that make sense, beloved? But we don't want to compromise also. I get it. I think he's more right than I am, to be honest. We have a super chat from Can. We appreciate how much effort he puts into these videos. That's the best, next to Overton Windex. That's my second favorite title, or name. Super chat and new member writes, bro, trust me, you're already relatable enough without cussing. Appreciate it. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Let's keep the cussing in perspective as well. We're not necessarily sailors here, but I get it. No one likes to be straightened out. but sometimes we need it. You need a swift kick in the behind, as my dad used to say. And we'll close with this. On this Sabbath evening, or the approaching Sabbath, Paleo 52, our newest member. Welcome. Goodness, great stream. I very much enjoyed this. A couple things. There won't be a live stream Monday and Tuesday. I'll also post that. Just a quick reminder. We'll be out of town. Go over, I'll put a link, I'll attach a link to this video in the subject heading. Go over and give some support to General Sam. I'm warning you, not family friendly, but Sam's podcast, and keep the Sabbath this weekend. Sabbath starts, as you know, at the fourth commandment starts with the word remember. Remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. You'll find that in the Old Testament. 6 days you shall work, but on the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord. You shall do no work, nor your maidservant, nor your manservant, nor the stranger at your gates, nor your animals, etc., etc. Have a day once a week to take a rest, and that's the day that God has sanctified and set aside is the seventh day of the week, which is Saturday. Many of you might be surprised by that. If you go look at your calendar, you realize that Sunday is the first day of the week. So now you're confused. Well, wait a minute. I thought Sunday was the seventh day of the week, and then you look at your calendar and you're like, oh, Sunday is the first day of the week. Saturday's the seventh day of the week. Well, what's going on with this? Well, our Catholic friends changed the Sabbath from worship from the day set aside by God to the seventh day. And they, in their catechisms and in their books, use that as the mark of their authority, that they have such authority that they can change the actual worship day of God. Change one of the, and not only that, but they also change the Ten Commandments. Look at the Protestant Ten Commandments, look at the Jewish Ten Commandments in the Torah, and then look at the Catholic Ten Commandments, and they changed it. Why did they change it? Well, as they claim, as a mark of their authority, changing times and laws. Prophecy tells that this would happen. So, they laugh at you Protestants who continue to worship on Sunday. And they say, well, you call yourself Protestant, but yet you are worshiping on the very day that we changed that as a mark of our authority? Ha! Fools. That's what that's the way they look at it. So, this knowledge is starting to become a lot of people that are true followers of the way. People are becoming aware of this. It will be met with a lot of resistance. For example, I have talked with and know of pastors that have come to this knowledge that have spent their entire life teaching and being pastor and leaders of Sunday-keeping churches. And now they've been made aware of this, and they have a tremendous struggle, knowing that if they were to bring this truth to their congregation, it would be the end of them, and they would be thrown out, because people are not all people are willing to hear this. This is heresy amongst many in the Protestant movement. But you have to ask yourself, why did God start with the word remember in the fourth commandment? The only one of the 10 that starts with remember. Well, it seems to me he said that because he knew we would forget, that would be changed. That truth is becoming aware and people are waking up to it. So, do with it what you will, but try it. Try keeping it. Pray about it. See how the Holy Spirit leads you onto this, and I promise it'll turn into a great blessing. A great blessing. To have something you can look forward to. And God told us that He set that day aside and He sanctified it and He made it holy. That's a very special day to spend in fasting. It's a very special day, or portions of it, to bring your petitions to God. He seems to be extraordinarily attentive on the Sabbath day. We have one final super chat before we shut the show down from Kieran Mirsalis. Shout out to Kieran, welcome. Who writes, my boss would very rarely curse, but with purpose. Told me once he uses it to build trust and rapport with his workers. I found it effective. Yep. Yeah, I can imagine so. I never heard my grandfather ever curse. But had he done it, it would have had a very profound effect on me. I would have been absolutely shocked and realized that he must have had something very important to communicate to me if he was willing to go to that. But I agree. I think Proho should strive to start stripping that from his vocabulary. Let that be something that distinguishes us from the heathens of the world. Just one more thing. Let us be an example, a shining light on a hill of righteousness, where there'll be no question that anyone around you knows that you serve the living God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Alpha and the Omega, the one that we were created in his very image. All right. Thank you, beloved. Thank you, great super chats. Thank you to the middlemen in the background for making this possible, and all of you who super chatted for supporting the channel. That comment about this being your church and this being your ministry was very important to me. I appreciate that very, very much. That means a lot to me. And it definitely puts a fine point of the responsibility that we have here to make sure that we don't get off on the wrong path. So if I'm on the wrong path, do tell me. And if I can choke back my pride, I might even learn something. So that's the way we need to be. Teachable. Teachable. We're all in this together. Thank you, beloved. May God bless you and your families. Please keep us in your prayers, and we'll see you guys on the next live stream.